Hello, everybody. My name is Ivan,
And my name is Stephanie.
and this is the Cultured Critics. So we got to start this episode off with an apology.
We really messed up the sound quality on our first podcast. Much like Michelle shooting the police officer in Breathless, we basically just fired the gun with recording it and not actually testing out the settings or how it was going to sound. So the quality is garbage, if you will.
Yeah, we apologize. We screwed up, but hopefully you are here giving us another chance, and this should sound a whole lot better than the last episode.
And maybe after we do a few more movies and TV shows, we can take down Breathless, and then new listeners, this won't make any sense to you, so please disregard.
Yeah, we'll probably toss that out eventually. But so today we're covering the Francis Ford Coppola epic Jack from 1996, starring Robin Williams.
Ivan, what did you think of this film?
Um, well, it's not quite on the scale of Apocalypse Now. It's not quite as sweeping or as intriguing as The Godfather, but I'd say it's up there as some of Coppola's best work.
I would agree with that. I definitely would not rate this a one-star film like Roger Ebert.
Yeah, I think he didn't quite get it. Maybe he missed some of the more subtle messaging and themes and motifs of the film.
Maybe this was his first Coppola film that he watched, so he was just unfamiliar. Again, he couldn't draw the parallels between Coppola's other works. So that maybe that's why he gave it a one star. That could have been my only guess as to why he did that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like we said, this movie, 1996, it stars Robin Williams, it stars Diane Lane, Brian Kerwin. So do you want to just get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it, jump around a little bit, talk about the different themes and parallels that we saw. The movie opens up with a Halloween party, and much like The Godfather, that film also opened up with a party as well. So,
yeah, I did notice that parallel right away.
Yeah, I did too. And also there was a scene of a clown laying on his back, blowing balls out of his mouth.
Oh, is this kind of like the opening to Apocalypse Now with
Exactly.
with Willard smoking the cigarette?
Yeah, laying on his back in bed, staring up at the ceiling. I caught on to that immediately.
I thought that's a great point, and I did also note about the Halloween party. I thought it kind of symbolized how all of us in society wear masks. You have everybody kind of wearing a different costume and a different mask, much as we, when we go out in society, we sort of wear a symbolic mask.
Yeah, nobody really knows who we are unless we take that mask off.
And just like the characters in Apocalypse Now, as they go down the river, they start to cover their faces up. At the end, Willard is completely covered in face paint, kind of symbolizing how he's lost his humanity. It kind of shows that, these characters have already lost their humanity.
Wow, I didn't even pick up on that fact. That is a really good parallel there between Jack and Apocalypse Now. Very insightful.
Yeah, one of many.
Yeah.
So, the mother, Jack's mother, starts to go into labor, and it's, she keeps noting that it's too soon, which leads us kind of into the whole thrust of the movie is that Jack ages very quickly. If you've never seen it, it's Robin Williams. He's a 10-year-old boy, but he's got the body of a 40-year-old. So his mother goes into labor after 2 months of being pregnant because the fetus has grown so quickly. When we get this birth scene, going back to Apocalypse Now, we see lots of strange, extreme close-ups, kind of upside-down camera angles. It kind of mirrors that madness from that movie.
Yeah, and right after Jack is born, he is placed on a table and all of this machinery starts poking and prodding him, which reminded me of how the youth are sometimes thrust into war and things that they are not ready for. This child needs, a loving mother instead of all of these machines making all these tests on him. So I really drew on that parallel between the two films.
Right. It's like how they take America's youth and put them into this machine of war.
Yes, that's exactly right, Ivan.
So we flash forward to Jack, and now he's 10 years old. He's Robin Williams. He is homeschooled, and his teacher is played by none other than the infamous Robin. Oh my God, screwed that up. Bill Cosby, the infamous Bill Cosby, plays his tutor. This was I didn't know Bill Cosby was in this movie going into it, so that was kind of a shocker.
Well, I saw him on the cast, but I didn't realize that his role would be teacher. Not my first choice of a homeschool teacher, but maybe they didn't know it back then. So yeah, basically Jack is homeschooled. There are kids outside who also, stop by every once in a while and basically think of him as this giant freak monster who they've never seen before, but they just speculate that he is this. And Jack is looking at them outside of his window, and he grabs an eyeball, a fake eyeball from his chest of toys, puts it in slime, and then throws it out his window at these kids. And one of the boys down the street picks it up and looks at it. And this just reminds me of the horrors of war, especially the Vietnam War.
Body parts.
Yeah, a very horrific scenery in that film. So this is kind of like a nod to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of little Easter eggs like that kind of. I guess you could say this movie is kind of about the Vietnam War in its own way.
Yeah, a little bit. I think I drew more parallels between this movie and Apocalypse Now than I did Jack and The Godfather.
Yeah, I couldn't find a lot between this movie and The Godfather. I think they're just different. I don't think there's a lot of connections there, but it does seem like he's drawing a lot of striking parallels to Apocalypse Now. And just like Apocalypse Now, which, that movie is kind of a descent into madness as the characters travel by boat down the Nung River. The movie gets more and more unhinged. The characters kind of lose their grip on reality and become more paranoid and more mad and insane. And this movie is also a descent into madness, but it is the viewer who is descending into madness.
Yes, I definitely descended into madness right after the eyeball scene, because in the next scene, Jack trips going up the stairs on his loose shoelace, and Bill Cosby starts tickling him. And
very uncomfortable.
It's a very uncomfortable scene. This is basically two grown men, one of them acting like a 10-year-old boy, the other being Bill Cosby.
So. Right. Yeah, I think we're meant to be uncomfortable here, just like, the horrors of war being on full display in Apocalypse Now. It's not comfortable to watch. You see, bodies hanging by ropes and people being massacred, dead children. I mean, it's uncomfortable to watch.
And even in this scene, Bill Cosby references cutting Jack's leg off because he hurt his knee. So again, a direct parallel to the war.
So we get a scene here, which I thought was kind of supposed to mirror the setup in Apocalypse Now, the kind of call to action. So we get a scene of the tutor, Bill Cosby. He's talking to Jack's parents about sending Jack to school. And this is just like the scene in Apocalypse Now where the commanders are talking to Willard and telling him that he needs to go find Colonel Kurtz. And he doesn't know if he should accept this mission. He has to kill another U.S. soldier. It's different than just killing enemy soldiers. And just like Willard, Jack's parents don't want to accept this mission. It's too hard to imagine.
But in both films, they do eventually accept both missions. So, again, you see that same kind of progression in both films. I also want to touch on a parallel I noticed between this scene and The Godfather. So Jack essentially wants a normal life, much like Al Pacino wants a normal life in The Godfather, but based on his family and his circumstance, he's not able to have that.
Right. No matter how hard he tries, it's not going to happen. Just like Michael Corleone. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have anything about the teacher and the principal? The principal introduces Jack to the teacher, so they go to school and everything. And I don't really have a lot to say about this scene. Do you have anything?
No, I really didn't pick up on any parallels here. Again, I was still drawing off of the parallel between this and The Godfather, and the circumstances of life parallel, but nothing other than that.
Now we do get a scene here where Jack, on the playground, we start to meet who will become his core friend group, and these characters are basically one for one the boat crew in Apocalypse Now. I mean, you have the chief, which is Louis. He's kind of the leader of the group. You have Chef, who is kind of the asshole kid with the spiky hair.
Yeah.
You have the surfer guy, who is, I guess he's one of those kids, and then you have the young one. What is his name? I should have wrote their names down.
Oh, I forget
on me.
his name.
But then the in Apocalypse Now they have the young 17-year-old who kind of represents innocence, and in some ways that you could say that's Jack, but I believe that's kind of the nerdy, goofy kid.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then of course Jack is Willard, where he's different from the other kids. Willard is a different specimen than this boat crew, but he's along with them for the ride.
Yeah, and much like Willard, Jack is looked on by his friends as kind of like the leader or the mentor of the group.
And yet also there's an underlying danger to him. Just like with Willard, they know this guy's dangerous. He's not like us. And with Jack, this guy could hurt us.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Off-topic comment about the playground scene. In the beginning, Jack is balancing on the balance beam. One of his shoes is untied. In the next scene, his shoe is tied.
What do you think that symbolizes?
I'm not exactly sure what kind of message he was trying to get across here.
Is that kind of the uncertain nature of war and how you can't control everything?
Or maybe it plays along with the descent into madness, like our brain is playing tricks on us now.
Right. It makes us as the viewer question what we're seeing.
Exactly. And right after that, Jack starts making animal noises like a dog and a cat. And again, that represents the descent into madness, making unnatural noises for him.
Stephanie, I have to ask you a question. Do you have Zachley disease?
What's that?
It's because your breath smells exactly like your butt.
That is terrible.
Yeah, they actually make this joke twice in the movie.
I actually do love that
I thought it was
joke.
hilarious, honestly.
I burst out laughing at that.
A little bit of levity in the movie.
Yeah, it definitely takes away from the more dark and deep tones of the film. Kind of like brings you back to your version of reality for a split second.
So we kind of see here Jack struggling to assimilate into school for a little bit. So he's not fitting in at first. He's too big for his desk. He falls and breaks a chair. He's not able to fit in on the playground. Kids think he's weird, and this mirrors Willard's inability to function in civilized society. In Apocalypse Now, Willard kind of comments to himself that he tried to go back to society and he just wanted to go back to the jungle and do another tour. He can't fit in, just like Jack. He can't fit in society.
Yeah, Jack comes home and he puts himself inside of a box and basically slides down the stairs, and his mother is trying to offer him chocolate pudding, but he wants none of that. And much like Vietnam veterans coming back from the war, they are just riddled with PTSD and they just cannot get out of their heads, much like Jack does not want to get outside of his box.
I think in this movie we have they do a couple hints to other characters who are kind of they're like what's the word I'm looking for? Not like a leader figure, but like an authority figure to Jack. And I think in different portions of the film, these authority figures represent Colonel Kurtz. And the first example we get of this is when Jack's father says that adults don't like sloppy joes.
I was appalled by the statement personally.
Well, I think it displays his madness. Just like Colonel Kurtz, he says things that don't make any sense.
And this did not make any sense to me. I was left questioning everything and the sanity of Jack's father. I'm like, this can't be a sane man.
Right. You know, all throughout Apocalypse Now, you're wondering what drove Colonel Kurtz to this. What will he be like? And when you meet him, you find out this man has gone completely insane, and you know, there isn't a lot of reason behind it. He has just, it is as straightforward as that he's lost his mind. He's been driven to this point by the horrors of war, and we kind of get that here with Jack's father. He's I think we could say he's driven to the edge by the mundanity of his suburban life, and so he makes an absurd statement like an adult doesn't like a sloppy joe, which is just not true.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one, Ivan. I think that's a good explanation for why he would make such a statement like that. The next day, Jack attempts to come outside of his box once again and goes back to the playground. He hides in a tunnel, much like American soldiers did in Vietnam, and his teacher comes by and tries to talk to him to give him some company, and he gives her one of his red gummy bears.
What do you think the red gummy bear represents here?
Probably the Viet Cong.
Interesting.
What did you think?
I honestly, I'm not sure. I might have to do another watch and kind of focus more on the motif of the red gummy bear, because it is kind of a through line throughout the film. The red gummy bears come back. Maybe they symbolize loss and rejection.
Yeah, maybe I'm just thinking about it too literally with the color red. I don't know, but maybe that could also symbolize blood loss and what he saw on the battlefield.
And sometimes red is considered an angry color. Maybe it's him giving his hatred to someone else and passing the cycle of hatred and violence.
Or it could be that he sees his teacher as someone who he can trust, and so he's trying to open up. A gummy bear is him telling his side of the story, of giving his emotions out. So I don't know about that. Maybe this will deserve a second rewatch of the film to really dive in deeper.
So we get a basketball scene, and Jack kind of starts to fit in here. The boys accept him because he's good at basketball. This scene to me kind of reminded me of the USO scene in Apocalypse Now with the character. We get a brief reprieve from the madness where we see the characters having fun, but we know that this can't last.
Yeah, it was either the USO scene for me or the scene of the general who likes to surf.
Oh, yeah.
In the middle,
Kilgore.
In the middle of all this madness, he hangs on to the one activity that reminds him of, himself, his old life, and that's what he wants to participate in the heat of battle.
And just like how their fun is short lived, eventually these, they end up attacking a village, and later on, after the USO scene, they inevitably return to the river. Jack and his friends must return to the classroom and go back to their homes.
And once they return back to the classroom, Miss Marquez, the teacher, gives them an assignment to write an essay about what they want to be when they grow up. Can you expand on this scene, Ivan?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of irony here, dramatic irony, and the idea of asking a character who will never grow up what he wants to be when he grows up. And I think this represents the futility of a war, such as the war in Vietnam. It's kind of it's a futile task that is just serves to advance the teacher's agenda, but it does no good at all for Jack, and if anything, it's just like some form of psychic torture where he's forced to reckon with something that existential and horrible.
Yeah, especially because in the war, they saw so much death and destruction that how can you even think about a future after seeing all those horrors?
Right. So I guess in this scene, I think the teacher kind of represents the American military-industrial complex, and Jack is kind of representing all soldiers in this point.
Yes. There is a child in the classroom that says that he wants to be a gynecologist. And Miss Marquez asks him, well, you're going to need to explain why he wants to be one. And he says, well, I want to be one because of you.
Yeah, this scene is... I don't have anything to say other than this scene made me laugh out loud, and I had to pause the movie because I couldn't believe that they put a line like that in the film.
These are like 10-year-old kids.
I mean, he basically says to his teacher that he wants to see her vagina. Like, that's basically what he said. And she, for her part, she does not react. She just, kudos to this teacher. How do you not react to that?
I know. I would just burst out laughing if I was a teacher and a kid said that to me.
So we get a scene where Louis, and this is where Louis and Jack become best friends. Louis is not doing so well in school, and his mom is coming to talk to the principal. And Louis is like, Jack, you look like an adult. Pretend to be the principal for me, and tell my mom I'm doing well in school. And Jack does. And Louis' mom, just does not pick up on the fact that this guy is really weird, because he's still acting like a 10-year-old. He does a pretty good job, but it's like you would think this guy is a weirdo. But I think this scene, again, we get to this motif of how we all wear masks. And, just like Willard coming back from Vietnam after his first tour trying to fit in with society, Jack is putting on a face and being somebody he's not.
And I believe it also represents that the youth are being thrust into these adult roles in Apocalypse Now. Coppola, I feel, also likes to touch base on the relationship between a son and mother. So in Apocalypse Now, they have a scene where the youngest boy on the boat is listening to a recording of his mother, and then he gets shot and killed. So
yes,
I think he just wants to draw on the importance of that relationship in this as well.
So, do you have anything about the sleepover? So Jack goes to a sleepover. I don't have a whole lot about this scene. Again, maybe another rewatch. There's probably a lot of symbolism I'm missing in the scene, but this is my first time actually seeing the movie.
Yeah, it's mine as well. The only comment I can make about the scene is when Louis comes over to Jack's house and Jack's mother answers the door with a gun in her hand. Again, a very common Coppola theme. Guns in basically every single Coppola film.
Yeah, in this film, it's a toy gun, but
I did forget to mention that it is a toy gun, not a real gun.
Right, but I think the message is there that violence kind of pervades our society. You can't get away from it.
Not even when you are asking a friend for a sleepover.
And during the sleepover, again, we kind of get a reference to after the USO show in Apocalypse Now, Willard bribes some guys with a barrel of fuel to for his guys to be able to sleep with the Playboy models, and this is kind of like how all the guys. Jack gets a Penthouse magazine and lets all the guys look at it, so they're all getting boners together.
Yeah, I did notice that. I also noticed visually that the treehouse resembled the last U.S. checkpoint on the river. At nighttime.
It's all dilapidated.
Yeah, exactly. And there's these tall wooden structures along the river. So that's what the treehouse reminded me of. Maybe Coppola drew the parallels there on purpose.
And we get a quick makeout scene between who's it? Jack's parents that they make out at one point in Jack's box, which is gross because that's where Jack likes to play. And also the makeout scene is just like Breathless. Excuse me. If you made it through that podcast, I commend you because again, we're sorry about the quality. But just like in Breathless, the makeout scene is egregious. It is way too much.
It is just like wide open mouth against each other. It's just disgusting. And this was also disgusting. And I'm sure Jack came back the next day and was like, man, why is my box all messed up?
So we get a scene where Jack's teacher joins the club, and they're all in the clubhouse.
Well, I did have another comment to make about the sleepover scene.
Mm-hmm.
During the sleepover, all the boys fart in a tin can, and then they pass it around and they smell each other's farts.
It's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
I hate this scene.
It is terrible. But this reminded me of the napalm bombs in Apocalypse Now. Did you get that? When Kilgore was like, I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
I didn't think about it that way. Do you have anything else to say about that? I don't want to talk about this scene because I hated it.
Yeah, that was just my only comment on it. I just wanted to touch base on that.
So like I said, the teacher joins the clubhouse, and then they're all acting rowdy. They're way up in the tree house, and the tree house collapses. Now, what do you think this treehouse collapse symbolizes? Because I think there's definitely something here, kind of about the collapse of the collective group's psyche. Sort of like how, like I said, as they go down the Nung River looking for Kurtz, the group's collective psyche just continues to deteriorate.
Yeah, I think this was actually the turning point where Jack finally is starting to come to terms with his own mortality. It's basically the collapse of this fragile structure that is your childhood. And Jack's childhood is basically almost over because his life is going to be like 20 years long. So I think that's what it symbolizes. Also, during the collapse, no one is hurt at all. So does this collapse even really happen? It feels impossible that nobody was hurt.
Right, and they don't really talk about it again, and it kind of, just like the shoelace thing, it makes you kind of question reality. You as the viewer are part of the experience here, part of the descent into madness.
Yeah. I also drew a small comparison between this and The Godfather, where Marlon Brando was shot in the chest multiple times, yet he lived. How is this possible? Are all of Coppola's films about the descent into madness in some sort of way? It just makes me question.
Maybe. And again, just like in The Godfather, not Willard, that is Apocalypse Now. But just like in The Godfather, Jack suffers a setback. He has a heart attack, and he collapses. And just like how Fredo is helpless and trying to help his father, Louis is kind of helpless here with Jack. Trying to come to his aid and get him some help. And just like how The Godfather is kind of taken out of commission, we see Jack, he's hooked up to machines, he's not allowed to go outside, he's weakened. What do you think of this scene?
I just think, you are suddenly hit so hard by the reality of Jack's situation, much like you are hit really hard by Willard's situation as he goes farther up the Nong River. Again, it just brings the futility of it all into perspective, and how fragile life is and how at any moment it can stop. And there's also a scene when Jack is bedridden where a butterfly flies through the window and dies.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed that in Apocalypse Now they killed a cow for the film. So in this movie they kill a butterfly. So I noticed those parallels as well.
I did want to say that, Jack realizes his time is running out and he can't go back. Just like Willard, he can never go back to who he was before the war. And just like how the atrocities of war kind of drive Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now over the edge, and they make Willard lose his humanity. This movie, I think Jack represents the way that the mundanity of suburban life makes someone feel like their life is over before they get a chance to live it. Jack kind of realizes his life is ending, and he hasn't really had a chance to live it at all because he's been kept inside by his parents the whole time. So, and I think we all sometimes feel like that we don't have as much control as we might like, and that our lives are ending, and we haven't had a chance to do everything we may have wanted to do.
And I think because of this thinking, Jack chooses to run away from home for the night and go to a local bar. He is basically going from one extreme to another, going from living his childhood in elementary school with his friends to going to a bar and hearing about a guy talk about going limp in his birthday suit, and Jack doesn't know what any of that means. And so I feel like Jack has no middle ground. He's going from one extreme to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that also happened with Willard. He went from having a normal family life, probably in some suburban town, to basically thinking that his life is going to end while he was trying to kill Kurtz.
Yeah, and I think you could also draw a parallel there for the character Clean in Apocalypse Now, the 17-year-old kid. 1 minute he's a kid, and having fun with his friends. The next minute he's in war, and he's seeing people die, and he's killing people himself, and there's no middle ground. He has skipped from this childish youth to this horrific war.
Right, and I feel like this interruption in somebody's life, whether they're 10 years old or 17 years old, I feel like there's no going back from that. There is no restoring youth and innocence once you go further on down the river of madness.
And just like the characters in Apocalypse Now who seek comfort in alcohol or weed or acid, Jack is seeking comfort in a bar by drinking alcohol and getting into a fight.
Yeah, and Jack loses more of his innocence when he says the Zackley joke again.
Mm-hmm. He says the Zackley joke to a man in the bar. It provokes him. They get into a fight. Jack is arrested, but not before he kind of makes out with Louis's mom, which is again an uncomfortable scene. I'm not sure what they're trying to make out of this scene. I'm not sure what Coppola's wanting us to feel here. Maybe that's the point. We're not sure how to feel. Is this inappropriate? I mean, he's 10 years old, but he has the body of a grown adult, and she doesn't know he's 10 years old. She thinks he's the principal.
Right. I think Coppola drew a lot of parallels between the Playboy bunnies and Apocalypse Now and the sexual undertones in this film as well. There's also a scene where we get a glimpse of what Jack's father does for a living, and it's a little bit unclear, but I think it's like either a Budweiser calendar or...
He's some kind of advertising professional. He takes photos for advertisements.
But I think there are Playboy-esque models in his photography. So again, there's a lot of parallels between the two films in regards to that.
So do you have anything else to say about the bar scene or Louis's mom, played by Fran Drescher, by the way, that whole scene?
I really didn't have anything else on it. It depicts violence, which I believe is the first time Jack has ever seen violence in his life. So again, it's Clean being pushed into the Vietnam War when he's only a child and seeing horrible, horrible violence for the first time in his life.
So after this, Jack becomes a recluse. He's not going to school anymore. He's depressed, and his mom's afraid for his health, so she keeps him from school. And then his friends want him to come out and play, and he doesn't want to come out because he doesn't see the point. And just like Colonel Kurtz, Jack has retreated from society. And I think in this scene, he was Willard. And now he is he is Kurtz. He is the recluse, and here Mr. Woodruff, played by Bill Cosby, the teacher, has become Willard, who he seeks out Jack in his seclusion and tries to probe his mental state and get an idea of how far the madness has taken him.
I found this really interesting because in both Apocalypse Now and Jack, once you become a recluse, that's where you start to notice that people really adore you. So much like Kurtz was adored in Apocalypse Now by the villagers and people under his command, Jack has realized that his friends really, really appreciate him and look up to him because they are all outside of his window for the entire day yelling at him to come out and for them to see him.
Yeah, I thought this was a clear visual reference to Apocalypse Now, with Colonel Kurtz kind of standing atop all of the villagers as well as the remaining men under his command who are loyal to him. They all kind of look up to him. He stands atop them, and very similar in this movie. Jack is up in his room on the top floor, and all the kids are out in the street. They're yelling. They're kind of wild and crazed, just like the villagers in the movie.
Both characters have become almost godlike to the people that are beneath them. So perhaps this is Coppola's way of saying once you descend into madness, maybe you become godlike in other people's eyes because you have essentially, supposedly, figured out what life is all about. And so other people who have not gotten as mad as you look up to you for that.
Yeah, well, I think they might identify a little bit with you and see that you've, like you said, you've figured it out, and they want that for themselves, and
I believe this is also displayed at the very next scene where the kids are back at school. Jack is still in his room, but Louis is giving his speech about what he wants to be when he grows up, and he does not state a profession or a goal of some sort in his life. He says he just wants to be like Jack. So
yeah, he talks about Jack's childlike innocence and the way that Jack sees the world, and how most adults just want to make money and participate in society. And I think Louis' speech, if you really listen to it, is a scathing condemnation of our capitalistic society.
Could you expand more on that, Ivan?
Well, yeah, like I said, I mean, he just, he talks about how adults just want to make money, and Jack's not like that. Jack kind of is outside of society. Jack sees everything new for the first time, kind of like somebody who's lost to madness. And, he's kind of saying that, just wanting to make money and participate in society, it doesn't have the value that we might ascribe to it. So, and I think maybe this is Coppola speaking through Louis as the speaker here. This is maybe the central message of the film.
I also picked up on the fact that Louis said in his essay that adults don't really want to be your friend like Jack does. And I think this is going back to the beginning of the film where the adults are all wearing masks. You don't really understand the kind of person they are unless they don't have their masks on.
Right, I that's a good point. I think you're right. I think he's kind of saying, and I think that, again, this is the director speaking through Louis here, is kind of saying, can you ever know if somebody really wants to be your friend? Is somebody ever really a friend to you? And I think he's saying, again, like the scene with the mask, you really can't know.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on that during the speech. I thought it was a very deep speech, and I thought he was brave for, standing in front of an adult and saying what he wanted to say. And Jack comes in right as Louis is finishing his essay, and so he has made his return to society.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of this. So Jack does return, and it's just a parallel to Apocalypse Now. So Jack, uh, he doesn't take Colonel Kurtz's place. So we think he might. Like in Apocalypse Now, we think that Willard might take Colonel Kurtz's place. He kills Colonel Kurtz, and at this point, the villagers and Kurtz's men accept him as a leader. They put down their weapons and they bow to Willard because they believe that he has figured it out, just like Colonel Kurtz. And he abandons them, maybe to retreat deeper into the jungle, maybe to return to society. We're not sure, but I think Coppola, in making this movie, is saying, no, he is returning to society. He has figured out, he's plunged to the depths of madness and seen what's there, and he is returning to society. So Jack does not become Colonel Kurtz. He retreats back to he makes his way back to society, all the better for his descent.
When was Jack made?
96 is when it came out, so 95 probably.
Okay, so this was after Apocalypse Now. So because Apocalypse Now was left with such an ambiguous ending, really left up to the interpretation of the viewer, perhaps Coppola wanted to come back to that and basically say what he wanted to say in the beginning with Apocalypse Now. He wanted to tell the viewer that Willard does return back to society. And I assume that because of the many parallels between these two films.
Yeah, this is kind of like a spiritual sequel to Apocalypse Now, almost, or a companion piece, I would say.
Yeah, viewers, listeners, if you haven't seen Apocalypse Now, I would recommend watching that and then watching Jack right afterwards, just to bridge the two gaps, and so you could see really what Coppola was intending.
I think it's just one gap to bridge there.
Yes, just one gap.
You just say bridge the gap because it's two movies, so there's one gap between them. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, well, as long as you understand what I'm trying to say.
So at the end, we kind of flash forward 7 years, and I'm like, oh my, what's going on here? This is interesting. But Jack is still alive. He's graduating from high school, and he has the appearance of an old man. He gives a speech of his own at the end, and Stephanie, I'm curious to hear what you think of this speech and this scene in general. What does this all mean?
Jack, in his valedictorian speech, is basically saying that, as you go on in your life, look to the summer sky and think of me. Basically saying that he's going to pass away very soon, which, everybody knows at this point. Maybe it's his final statement of his life. It was hard for me to pick up on the undertones of this because I was still just shocked that he was even alive to graduate.
Yeah, again, I think this scene might merit a rewatch. I think there's a lot here that we're not quite, we didn't quite pick up on, but I think there's a lot to kind of dig into.
Right, and we see the other characters from earlier in the film, like Louie's mom is now married with somebody else, and Jack's parents have a daughter of their own. So basically we're seeing everybody's lives moving forward still, but Jack's is coming to a close. Mm-hmm. So what did you think of that?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe that is kind of supposed to mirror Willard, how he continues to go back to Vietnam because it's all he knows, but society is moving on without him. In the beginning of Apocalypse Now, he kind of mentions that when he first came back, he didn't speak to his wife except to say yes to the divorce. So I don't know if that's kind of the idea that your life kind of stands still while you're at war, but society is moving on without you.
The world stands still for no one, and this movie is a good representation of that, I feel.
So, any closing thoughts on this film, Stephanie?
I was very shocked visually at the very end, because when we see Jack for the first time after that 7-year flash forward, he has like tremors in his hand, And then after he gives his speech, he jumps into Louis's car, much like a 37-year-old would. So I'm not sure what to make of that. Maybe, again, it's a...
He does struggle a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. But again, I'm just like, is this Coppola's tricks of the eye again? Is it another scene to make us question our own sanity? I don't know.
One last reminder that, don't trust your eyes here. It might not be as you perceive it to be. It's an interesting way to end the movie.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. And then it just fades to black and the movie is over and you're just left wondering, what did I just watch?
And again, Roger Ebert, like we said, he gave this 1.5 stars. And I really think if he would have given it another watch or maybe watched it, shortly after watching Apocalypse Now, he might have got it a little more. I just think he didn't, reading his review, I don't think he really picked up on kind of the symbolism and the war motifs and all the little hints and subtleties in the film.
Right. He referred to this film as a sitcom, which I did not pick up on at all. I think that is a very surface level description of the film. Sure, there are a couple scenes where you have some laughs, but that is only to take away from the deeper meanings of the film.
Right, and I'm sure a lot of people share Ebert's view, but that's why we're here. We're here to kind of enlighten people. I hope you listening to this, I hope you feel enlightened. We're not exactly, we're not trying to say that we're better than anybody or that we're geniuses, but I think we have a certain eye for these things.
And that's what made us want to create a podcast, because I feel like we have a really refreshing view on these, works of art, and we're here to share those views. And perhaps there are some listeners out there that agree with us.
Yeah, and if you want to share your thoughts on Jack, if there's a couple scenes where we mentioned we weren't really quite sure what to make of the scene. If you have some insights, hit us up, theculturecritics@gmail.com. We're on Twitter or X. And even if you have a suggestion for another film where you want to hear our viewpoint, just drop us a line and we'll definitely consider it. We'll read your feedback on the air. We're happy to hear from fellow film enthusiasts
and fellow cultured critics as well.
Anything else, Stephanie, you want to say about this film? I think that's it for me.
I think that's it for me as well. Thank you everyone for listening. My name is Stephanie.
My name is Ivan, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my own.